Yo, folks, what's up? What is going on? I know, middle of the day. Maybe it's lunchtime. Maybe you're coming on, maybe you're not. We're going to see. Give folks a couple minutes here. Yo, fam, let's get it. All right, let's jump in. Let's get this going. Let's get this going. Let's get this going. All right, everybody. So this is a first. Welcome to the Pivot Play podcast. I am Jerry A. Thompson. And this is a first because we are on live. We usually pre-record all the episodes and then edit them and put them out. We're not doing that today. Never wanted to do that. Always wanted to do the show live. But, you know, I've been in the internet abyss, so we never could get the stable connection. Anyway, so let's jump right into this. So I'm super psyched. I may make some mistakes, right? When we pre-record the show, I can always edit some things. But anyway, I got some things I want to share with you. So let's call today's episode. This is episode number 21 of the Pivot Play podcast. And today I'm just going to give you the punchline in terms of what we're talking about. And it is raise your hand before you raise your sword. So before we jump into this, if you send me a comment, I should be able to see it. That's what they told me. If you do, I will react to that. I'll answer your questions or share your comments. So here's what I want to start with. And a lot of what I share with you guys is based on my own experiences, the things that I draw from those experiences, what I learn, what I glean. And I try to repackage that in a way that it's useful, right? Pivot play is what we call, discussions in active life design. So what are the things that we need to do? What do we need to be thinking about in order for us to really get the most out of our life moments, the most out of the things that we spend our time, our energy, our money on, our allegiance, our trust. So I've had a couple situations recently, so I want to talk to you guys about this. And when I say, raise your hand before you raise your fist. So let's start with this. Change is difficult. And for a lot of people, it's really, really hard. We like things that are predictable. We like things to go in a way that makes sense to us, things that make us feel comfortable. And so when change comes about, it can be very unsettling. But change is a fact of life, right? If you're going to avoid all change, you're probably going to move to a place very quickly where you're not going to grow very much in your life. And so I had a situation recently, I've been in leadership a long time, and it's not uncommon to have people who don't get along, people who don't like each other, people who, I can't stand him, I can't stand her, I don't work with them. We've all seen this, and I don't care what arena you're in, you have seen this. Maybe you've been that person. I can't stand them, right? But and I've always said too that understanding is sometimes more valuable than agreement. We may not ever agree, but if we can sit down and understand where each other is coming from, we have a greater opportunity for us to be able to work together. And so, in a recent situation I had to deal with two people who certainly are very skilled, right? And think about this if you've ever seen this. So with people who have a level of skill, but they lack the emotional intelligence to be able to work well with other people. So when that happens, this is when you get the person who has to be the biggest brain in the room, or they have to be the biggest mouth in the room, and their yes is supposed to be, more meaningful than other people's yes. They want to be heard more than others. It becomes super important for them to be right. And so I was trying to hear out one of these individuals, and all I heard is, this was right, doing this would be right, doing this would be right, doing this would be right. And over my lifetime, I've come to have different views about right. So the first thing I believe is this: right is not always right now. Just because you think it doesn't mean that other people think it. Just because you believe it doesn't mean that other people are going to believe it. You got to where you are because you came through a very specific course in life. And what I mean by that is you today are the sum total of all the experiences that you've had in life. So for you to arrive at a point of understanding or an epiphany, that's personal to you, but it doesn't mean that everybody else is supposed to be there, right? And this is where, leadership comes in. It's like, how do you build a coalition? How do you get people to understand where you're coming from? So perhaps they will defer to you, but right is not always right now. But also, if you come into a situation, especially if you're new to it, right? You're new to the situation. I find it best to observe before I speak, right? And one of the things I share with people quite often is when I go into a new situation, I want to watch it like a movie until I can play it like a video game. See what I'm saying? Let the history, reveal itself. Let the plot reveal itself. Let the characters reveal themselves before you jump into a situation. So there's something to be said for having that level of patience, us being able to be observant and say, let me see what this is about before I go all in on what I think about something. So that's another thing to really keep in mind. And so if you come into a situation, especially if you've been invited in, right, to help, support, to fix, whatever that is, still gathering that information. And now let's say you find something that can be improved, could be better. Maybe it's even a risk to have it there. This is what you have to think about. If you go in and say, my way is the right way, well, what's on the other side of right is wrong. And the person who may have put the wrong, quote unquote, wrong thing in place could be the way that they've built their reputation in this environment. It could be the way that they got their last promotion or their raise, but there's some, level of their credibility in this organization that could be based on this thing, and you come in with a wrecking ball. So you're not going to make an ally, you're going to make an enemy. So I'm going to say this to you. This is what I would do. They always say in sales, make people feel good about their last purchase. So if this is the thing that's there and you have a point of view that other people don't have, don't take a wrecking ball to this thing. Honor this thing. Acknowledge it. It's serving a purpose. Even if it's not optimal, it's still working. And then you can say, how do we take this work that has been done or this process that's been put in place, this product that we have on it, how do we take this and now pivot to something where we can improve it? How do we build on this? How do we make it better? See, notice what I've done is I've preserved the goodness of this, even if we end up mothballing it, putting it in a museum and putting, velvet ropes around it. I have honored this thing, and therefore I've given the person who may be responsible for it an escape. I've given them a way out without me having to trash, their reputation in order to make my point. Because again, I won't have an ally. I will then have an enemy. And so another way to consider this is, do I look at it in terms of what's right or wrong, right? Because this is what you may have seen in situations that I've seen. Have you ever worked with someone and it's difficult to distinguish what they do from who they are as a person? So for some people, they become their skill, they become their talent, they become their expertise. And so it's difficult to separate the work from the person. So when you get into those situations, it's much more difficult, because now if you take a hammer to the work that they've done, that's the same as annihilation from them, because they can't see, this is me, this is my work. My work may need to change, but I'm intact. There's a lot of people, for them, their total identity is what they do. What they do becomes who they are. Right? So if they are a musician or a preacher or a teacher or a scientist, that's literally what everything is in that, and you cannot decouple those two things. So that makes it even much more difficult. And so rather than right and wrong, right, which puts this person in that situation where they feel they have to now defend, right? If you say I'm wrong, you've asked me to defend myself. If you ask me to explain, totally different. You left me an out. And so what I prefer to do is to rather go in saying this is right and this is wrong. This is what it is. But the options that I want to bring about in terms of this pivot are what's good, what's better, and what's best. And some of that can be subjective in terms of how we reach those determinations of what's good, what's better, and what's best. But it's a far cry from what's right and what's wrong. There's less for us to fight about. And if we want to go from good to better to best, there may be other objective components, variables we can bring into this. Are there stated best practices? Can we look at the way that other organizations have met this challenge, the way other individuals have met this challenge in their life to reach this scale of good, better, best, rather than simply go in on what's right and what's wrong? You make far less enemies if you can parse it out, make it more objective than subjective, and try to drain some of the emotion out of it, because once it goes boom, then we have a problem. And this is where I get to this idea of raising your hand before you raise your sword. And there's some people that, because they believe that they are right, they believe that they are justified to raise the sword. And me personally, I have a big issue with that. When people say, well, I'm just telling the truth. Well, you're presenting a truth. And really, for most of you, you're presenting a perspective. Remember, you went through a certain path to get to where you are. You went through certain experiences to get to where you are. I may have come a completely different route. So what means one thing to you doesn't mean the same thing to me. And this is where this leadership component comes in and says, there is a better way for us to do this. How do we get there? I saw a heart. Thanks for the hearts. Appreciate it. Don't have any comments yet. I'm really looking for comments to come through, again, because we want to do more on this platform and do live, do live episodes as opposed to recording, and I got to do all that editing. But again, I see a lot of people who raise their sword, and they're righteous, right? Because I'm right. They wrong. I'm just telling them how it is. People can't handle me because I'm telling them the truth. Your truth is a perspective, and I don't really care what your platform is. It's a perspective. And then this happens in so many arenas, but I could give you an article, I could give you a poem, I could give you a scripture, hand that out to 50 people, and we could all come back with different interpretations of what it means to us, because it's going to be filtered through your experience. So some of you have put yourselves in situations that cannot be recovered because you raise your sword instead of raising your hand. And when I say raise your hand, who do you seek counsel from before you go into this other arena and speak, quote unquote, your truth? Who has been there and done that? Who is outside of it and doesn't have the same emotional investment in it that you do, who can advise you on, here's some different things to consider? Like, if it were me, I'm going to say, what do you eventually want to come out of this? Are you looking for a ticker tape parade that says that you were right and this person was wrong? Do you ultimately want to, align yourself to this higher level objective and say, I think we have a different way to get there? And here's what I can tell you. In the work that I do, that I'm responsible for, in networking, there are any number of different ways to get something done. It doesn't make one more right or more wrong. They're just different. But we do ask a different set of questions, right? Does doing this way allow us to scale? Can we build from this without having to rebuild it again? Is there implementation risk? Is there operational risk? Is there supportable? There's another set of questions that we can ask. But when you find people so tied to what's right and what's wrong and their point of view, it's very difficult for them to be able to even ingest those questions. The questions are offensive to them. If the questions are offensive to you, that says to me that it's more about you than this higher level objective, the thing that we all want to achieve together. But if you don't seek counsel before you throw yourself up on the stage and start waving your sword, slashing it around, cutting heads, and thinking that you're righteous, you will destroy situations. Because then after the fact, once the smoke clears and you realize that you could have played into that situation better, here's this tough reality. Sorry don't fix everything. My bad don't fix everything. Sometimes you have to acknowledge where you stepped off the plank into deep shark-infested waters and you have to own that outcome. And I've seen people make a big, huge storm out of things, make a big mess of things, slow down organizations, initiatives, honorable, integral work, because we got to all circle around your point of view and you thinking that you're right and you swinging your sword all over the place. And then when it's all said and done, you want to, my bad. Sometimes that works. Sometimes people will give you a second chance. Sometimes people will believe that there's better in you than simply your point of view and your narcissistic tendencies. But other times, you got to package your shit. You got to go home. You got to go somewhere else. And some of you have experienced this, have seen this being displaced, not because what you wanted to bring did not have value. You simply didn't know how to bring it. Listen, I work in technology. Our objective is to make those lights go blinky, blinky and keep everything up so people can keep doing the things that they're doing, whether they know the technology is there or not. So what I've learned is tech is not that difficult. What's difficult are people and organizations. So you can have this skill, this thing that you do, but if you don't develop some skill with people and how to work within organizations, it won't matter. And you'll just find yourself moving on to the next place. And I've seen those folks. You can look at their resumes and they're just littered with I've been here, been here, been here, been here, been here. And when you ask them about it, you don't see many people that's like, yeah, I messed that up. I blew it. It was on me. I hadn't grown to a point where I knew how to express the passion. And sometimes people are driven by passion. They really mean it. They feel it deeply. They want to see, quote unquote, the right things done. But then it's on you to build the skills to deliver that message, to help preserve someone else's reputation in an organization or in that situation, that they don't have to be destroyed so that you can feel like you've accomplished something. So listen, I don't want to draw this out. I love that this is a short episode. I love that we're able to do these things live now. Thank God for better internet connectivity from a networking guy inside his own house. Took me a year to fix this. Hey, but nonetheless, just keep it in mind. Raise your hand before you raise your sword. All right? Hey, hit me with comments. You can still go to livefreeinspirations.com to get your gear, of which I'm wearing none of it today. But when this hit me, I'm like, we got to talk about this right now. I got on my Golf for Life. This is my other brand that's coming about, and a Nike shirt who's paying me $0 to do this. All right? But it's all about y'all. Hopefully you guys get something out of this. Episode 21 of the Pivot Play podcast. Raise your hand before you raise your sword. All right? Peace out, y'all.